What was that? Hey man, how you doing? I watch you see. What's going on? Why is it the audio not playing? What? Here, okay, let's try this again. Okay. Okay, let's just wait for it.
Traitor to humanity. But yes, I still love you.
There's some intense stuff right over there.
Do the right thing.
Well, they're wearing names on there.
We love you. We love you. We love you. We love you.
What the hell is that? So the audio's off. I don't know what's going on. All right. Well, that's a fail. Good afternoon, everybody. I told Dr. Vinu backstage that I'm going to be in a bad mood today, and I'll have to explain why when he comes on, but he's watching now and he'll see. So for those of you who don't know, the Commissioner Rouleau, after the 6-week Public Order Emergency Commission issued his final report today. And I said at the end of the protest, when Trudeau violently suppressed the most peaceful, beautiful protest I've ever seen in my life, and I think the world has ever seen, I said that was the black pill of black pills for me, because we didn't know. They were at the time, not everybody understood the Emergencies Act. There was going to be a commission to look into this and see whether or not Justin Trudeau acted properly, invoked the law appropriately. When he brought in a militarized police and stomped elderly Indigenous women with RCMP horses, assaulted Canadian veterans, cuffed them, hauled them outside of the city and left them in the snow. I said, that was the biggest black pill of my life. Having seen the way Trudeau, over the course of 3.5 weeks, didn't take one damn minute to talk with the protesters, violently suppressed the protests. And I said, okay, well, we'll have the hearing, and he'll get his just desserts, his comeuppance politically when that happens. Well, the commissioner issued his report today after the 6-week hearing and concluded that Justin Trudeau had met the threshold to invoking the Emergencies Act. It's the darkest day for Canada in my lifetime, without qualification, without exception. People don't understand the hell that they have just ushered in, and there's people on Twitter very happy about this, happy about putting on their own handcuffs and tightening them. So we're not talking about this today, but I can't hide my dismay. So I'll try to get perky when Dr. Venu's here, because we're going to talk about something else. And tomorrow I'm going to talk about this with Keith Wilson, who's going to come on. We're trying to find a time to do this. So tomorrow, Keith Wilson will come on and we'll talk about it. Before I get started, I saw 2 chats that I want to bring. I'm Not Your Buddy Guy says, Canada has embraced authoritarianism, wartime measures being declared lawful towards a peaceful protest. Please, Viva, I'll do anything to help me escape. And we got a $33. So we'll talk about it tomorrow. And I'm not going to let this ruin what is the subject matter of today, which is a doctor who is suing, call it the hospital, but there's more dynamics to the entity that he's suing for vaccine mandates. The whole situation makes absolutely no sense. I've been listening to a podcast with Dr. Vinu with a woman named Tessa Lena, which it's been a fascinating podcast to listen to. Let me just make sure I can give the proper credit, because it's on Spotify. And the woman, the interviewer's name is Tessa Lena, Tessalena. I think she sounds like she has a German accent, but I'm not sure. And it was a fascinating podcast. I'm almost done, but it's allowed me to gain some insights into Dr. Vinu. So I'm going to try to smile. But now the doctor knows why I'm going to be very, very upset for the duration of this stream. Now, all right. So with that said, we're on Rumble, we're on YouTube, and I want to make sure that we're good on Rumble. We are, and I'll go set up a live chat in locals. But so with that said, Debbie Downer intro. Wah wah wah. Let's welcome Dr. Vinu. Dr. Vinu Julapalli, and I don't know. I've been calling him Dr. Vinu. I'll say, okay, I'm bringing you in, Dr. Vinu. Here we go. How's it going?
Viva. It's going well. Thank you.
Okay, so other than the fall of Canada that we've just witnessed today, Dr. Vinu, how was how was the hockey game? Okay, so sorry about that. I'll get over it in a bit, and I won't talk about it again for the rest of this stream because this stream scheduled kind of last minute. We spoke for the first time yesterday, so I could hear your story, and it's an outrageous story. The world is going to hell in a handbasket, Dr. Vinu. Tell the world who you are. 30,000 foot overview. 30,000 foot overview before we get into this.
Sure. So my parents are from India. They immigrated, I think, 1970. I was born in Brooklyn. I was only there for a year, and I grew up all over the South. I'm a Southern boy. I grew up in Alabama. Spent formative years in New Orleans, different parts of Texas. And most Indian parents of my generation, they want you to be a doctor or an engineer, and so I chose medicine. I went to undergrad at Stanford. I came back to Houston and did all my medical training here at Baylor College of Medicine, which, just to give it a little context, Baylor College of Medicine is in the heart of what's called the Texas Medical Center, which is the world's largest medical center complex. There's 2 medical schools right there across the street from each other. There's 6 or 7 huge institutions, county hospital, VA hospital, private hospitals, including Houston Methodist, which is at the heart of this story. So I'm a product of those institutions.
Okay. Now, and I realized I did a bad job setting this one up because we set the stream up so last minute yesterday. So I didn't even give people the heads up as to what it's about, but we'll get there in a second. Born and raised, you said, in America. Where were you born?
Born in Brooklyn.
Brooklyn. Okay. And then you lived in the South.
Mm-hmm.
How many siblings do you have in your family?
I have 2 brothers and a sister.
And what did your parents do growing up?
So my dad's an interventional cardiologist, and really he came during that LBJ era where they opened it up to engineers and physicians. So a lot of Indian parents of my parents' generation came either as engineers or as physicians, and everybody came through New York pretty much. My mom was a homemaker, took care of us rugrats.
Fantastic. All right. We're not going to, ordinarily I do childhood and schooling and all this stuff, but it's the lawsuit and it's what happened during COVID that is particularly fascinating, but we need to know your credentials. You're a gastroenterologist. Your brother is...
My brother is also an interventional cardiologist, like my father. Okay.
So you have the credentials. Oh, if you're a gastroenterologist, I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions after we're done.
You won't be the first.
I know. No, I'm joking. I'm not going to. How long have you been practicing for?
I've been in practice on my own for almost 20 years.
May I ask how old you are?
I have to think about this. I am 47 going on 48.
Tabarnouche. You look young. You don't look a day over 40.
Thank you.
So you've been practicing gastroenterology for 20 years. And you studied at Baylor.
Yes.
I don't think, look, no one's going to deny your credentials. So let's see here. Let me explain the practice of medicine as a whole before we get down to COVID. I'm from Canada. We have different government systems as far as the healthcare system goes, but I think we probably have the same problems in terms of generalized health. What has been your experience as being a GI over the last 2 decades?
Sure. So it's 4 years of medical school, and then there's a fork point for many people. You can go into surgery or you can go into internal medicine. And of course, there's other fields like psychiatry and OB gynecology. Gastroenterology is a subspecialty of internal medicine. So you do 3 years of internal medicine and then anywhere from 3 to 4 years of a fellowship, which in my case was gastroenterology. So it's, 4 plus 3 plus 3, it's 10 years of training. So it's a long training. And then you get out and you have a choice in terms of what you want to do. You can go into academia, you can go into private practice, you can, go to the VA, which is a government job. I was fortunate in that my dad was an interventional cardiologist here in Houston. He had a network. So I went on my own. which is quite rare these days. And it probably plays into what happens in the rest of the story. But I was on my own. As soon as I finished fellowship, I went into solo practice. I set up my own practice. I didn't have any bosses. I set it up exactly how I wanted to set it up. And I used the networking of my father to start building the practice. And that's how it really began. One of the first things that I realized when I got out of training is that the healthcare system is a matrix. It's crazy in many ways. It was crazy even before COVID. COVID just took it to, a 10x level. But the things that I was witnessing, and I'm kind of like maybe a Gen X middle zone kind of person, because I could see the old schoolers, that's who taught me, but then I could also see the newer generation coming up. And what I started to see, I was taught to be a critical thinker, independent-minded, use evidence, be informed by it, but not be enslaved by it, and then apply that evidence to the individual, unique patient in front of you. And that's how you took care of people. As I got into practice and as the system, as I was seeing it, evolved, I didn't like what I was seeing. There was less independent critical thinking, more just rote protocols. I think the whole idea of the electronic medical record system, and I'm as wired as it gets. I've never had paper charts. I have my own EMR, but it really changed many things because it really started to enslave the physician. Oftentimes the computer would be sitting right in front of the physician and get in the way of the patient. And there were a lot of rules and regulations in terms of checking boxes. Nurses know this well too. So all of that, in my mind, was making the mind and heart of the physician more regimented, more commoditized, more really kind of like the Borg. That's what I was experiencing.
The Borg?
It's a Star Trek reference.
Yes. Okay. That
Resistance is futile.
Okay. I thought it was Star Wars, but I also was never into Star Trek.
I can go both ways.
And explain this to people. Like, people tend to think of medicine as something that can be replaced by AI. And this is an interesting thing that I got from your podcast with Tessa. Is I didn't when you explain medicine as a practice, like law, as an art, something that AI can't fill in for. I mean, explain that and how you saw this sort of evolution of the practice of medicine going from an art to something robotic.
Well, I mean, that's what to me makes medicine. I mean, it's quite a sacred profession to me. I mean, it really is a calling. I mean, I don't know if everybody would see it that way in terms of how I see it, but I think many of us still do that, still do see it that way. It is the intersection of art and science. There's certainly a lot of science involved. I mean, it is a discipline that involves biology and chemistry and whatnot. But when you're sitting in front of a human being, I mean, at its core, when you're sitting there in the office or in the hospital environment, you are communing with a fellow person, a sacred human being. And so to me, and I teach this to students that rotate through me, the most important thing in medicine by far is to connect, is to commune, is to actually have a connection in that sacred patient-doctor relationship. And then you bring in the science, you bring in the technology, and ultimately that serves that relationship. And that relationship is fundamentally built on trust. I mean, that's at the heart of the whole thing.
As a GI, do you do colonoscopies?
I do.
Okay, well, let me just ask you that. Sorry, this is my own total tangent. How do you do colonoscopies? Like, do you not? You have to see people of all shapes and sizes and of all levels of hygiene. I mean, and I know that the process. Sorry, I don't even know I'm asking this, but when you do these things, do you dissociate yourself from the human on which you're performing the procedure in order to do it properly?
Well, no. I would say no. I mean, you want to be technical, of course. You are taught that in training in terms of the technical aspects of it, but you must never dissociate yourself from the human being in front of you. You wouldn't be doing your job if you did that. I mean, it's not merely like playing a video game, although you have a scope in your hands and you're using your hand-eye coordination. I mean, every surgeon I know who's excellent, every internal medicine doctor I know, I think they would all agree with me that not only do you have to have the technical proficiency, let's say if you're doing a procedure, but you can never forget that you have a real life breathing human being in front of you. So no, you don't dissociate. You do the job that you're trained to do while recognizing that you have a real life in front of you.
And one of my mentors, as a lawyer, said, at some point in time, some lawyers, most lawyers tend to end up having disdain for their clients because they don't do what they say. They only come to see them when they have problems. They're always complaining and whiny. Is this as pervasive in the practice? Is this as pervasive in the practice of medicine as it is in the practice of law, that doctors at some point just get fed up with their patients as a whole, which might explain some of the dehumanizing treatment of doctors towards their patients?
Yeah, I mean, considering now I'm in law school as well, it's an interesting question. That's a different story. But yeah, I mean, one of the things that I think has really pressured physicians is the system itself. So I think that might be a theme here, in the sense that the constraints of the system have unfortunately pushed physicians to perhaps become more inhuman. It's not something that physicians want to do, of their own accord. But when you have the gravitational pull of a system that is commoditizing the whole thing, that is making everything into, bean counting, then yes, that is what starts to happen. In fact, that's what I experienced when I would, let's say, take consultations in the hospital. I was being seen more as a technician, more of a, sort of a, check the box, versus what I was trained to do, and which is to communicate with people, to figure out how to take care of a person who's a patient, a human being. So there was a breakdown, as I saw it, in communication, interaction, communication among physicians in a way that was human. So yes, it has happened. I think that it can still be preserved and it can still be renewed. But unfortunately, in the era of COVID, I mean, it's just gotten worse, I would say.
Now, someone's gotten wise to us, Dr. Vinu. We got Dr. Paul Alexander wrote an article in his Substack recently on Dr. Julapalli's finding that a high-ranking official at Methodist Hospital offered his colleague the opportunity to fake getting the vaccine, with an interesting spelling. Nom nom, you're 100% right. And that's going to be the good segue into getting this story started. But before we get this story started, we're going to wind this down on YouTube and go exclusive to Rumble. This doesn't change anything on our end, Vinu. I'm just going to end the YouTube stream. The link is there, everybody. So mosey on over, and I'll publish the entire stream in its entirety to YouTube tomorrow. But let's go over to Rumble.